Donald Trump is claiming 2 victories in a row. First, the tax cut plan making it through the Senate late Friday night, and now the Supreme Court ruling today that the 3rd version of his travel ban can go into effect while appeals are being heard in lower courts. And yet the White House mood is a little less than celebratory, as Special Investigator Robert Mueller's team appears to be closing in on something. But is an obstruction of justice charge really off the table? So claims Donald Trump's personal lawyer, who today told Axios the president cannot obstruct justice because he's the chief law enforcement officer under the Constitution's Article 2 and has every right to express his view of any case. Now, as you've likely heard, calls about obstruction have been growing louder ever since the tweet Trump sent out midday Saturday saying, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He's pled guilty to those lies. It's a shame because his actions during the transition were lawful. There was nothing to hide." That same Trump attorney, John Dowd, now says he drafted that particular tweet. You know, his lawyer might do for anyone. He also says the tweet does not admit obstruction. Those who argue it does point out that Trump admits he knew Flynn lied to the FBI when he had a conversation with James Comey the next day, in which Comey claimed Trump said to him, quote, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He's a good guy. I hope you can let this go." In an early morning tweet yesterday, Trump declared he, quote, "never asked Comey to stop investigating Flynn, just more fake news covering another Comey lie." Then added this before heading off to Joint Base Andrews yesterday.
Well, I feel badly for General Flynn. I feel very badly. He's led a very strong life, and I feel very badly. Hillary Clinton lied many times to the FBI. Nothing happened to her. Flynn lied, and they destroyed his life. I think it's a shame.
That's all in one day. Joining me now are Lylah Alphonse, managing editor of news for U.S. News and World Report. Good to see you, Lylah.
Nice to see you.
And former U.S. Attorney Don Stern, who was appointed by President Clinton, worked alongside Bob Mueller, both during his stint with the Department of Justice and in private practice at Hale & Dorr. Good to see you, Don. Thanks very much for being here. Did Trump help make Mueller's case for obstruction of justice with that tweet I just read?
I don't know that he made the case, but it certainly is consistent with the theme that we've seen in other actions that the president has taken, trying to get the congressional committees to lay off, trying to get Comey to go easy on General Flynn. So there is a consistent drumbeat theme. I don't think one individual act, one individual tweet will make or break a case.
Why doesn't it add more than you suggest when he says, I think for the first time, "I knew he lied to the FBI," which is what he's saying there, even though Dowd is trying to claim credit for it. And if you knew that he lied to the FBI, which is a crime, and you tried to convince James Comey not to go after him for a crime, isn't that almost the textbook definition of obstruction of justice?
It's pretty close, but I have to say that the water is muddied a bit by the arguments that Trump's lawyers make, which is it's complicated because it isn't as if you and I were trying to get somebody to get off an investigation. This is the president that under the Constitution has certain responsibilities and certain rights, which we look to essentially be the chief executive of the executive branch.
I think Bill Clinton would disagree with Dowd
and Richard Nixon.
Exactly, on the president's inability to commit obstruction of justice. Even Jeff Sessions voted to remove Clinton from office on the obstruction of justice charge for which he was impeached.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a winning argument. I don't know what the law is. Two things are clear about the obstruction. One is that it can be the basis for articles of impeachment. We know that because
Alan Dershowitz today said no.
I know that, but it was done in the Nixon case, and it was certainly done in the Clinton case. Right. And the second thing we know is that any if you will, protection that you have as president disappears once you are no longer president, which is why Nixon was pardoned.
Very quickly, though, you worked with Mueller. You know how he operates, and you know how, obviously, prosecutors work since you were one of them. It is clearly fair to say that he would not have been charged with only lying to the FBI. I'm not saying it's not significant. It's obviously a crime.
He being Trump.
He being Flynn,
yeah.
Were it not for the fact that he has offered Robert Mueller about a lot more powerful people. Is that a safe assumption?
That is a very accurate statement. Judging by the media accounts, and that's all any of us really know, General Flynn was facing much more serious charges. It's actually a pretty good deal from Flynn's point of view. So the only conclusion that I can draw is that he is uniquely situated as an insider at the very highest levels, both within the campaign and within the White House.
So can we move to Roy Moore for a second? Here, yet another tweet, shocking that that's the basis for this. Here's Donald Trump. He incidentally did call Roy Moore to endorse him, apparently, on the phone. But before that, Democrats' refusal to give even one vote for massive tax cuts is why we need Republican Roy Moore to win in Alabama. We need his vote on stopping crime, illegal immigration, border wall, military, pro-life, VA, judges, Second Amendment, and more. No to Jones, a Pelosi, Schumer puppet. You know, the headline all day today on CNN was Trump endorses accused child molester Roy Moore. Even if in the short run he has a vote, assuming he wins a week from tomorrow, and there's one poll has him up, one poll has him down, even if he wins and can vote on the final tax bill and things like that, in the long term, explain to me how this does not reap carnage within the GOP.
Well, it doesn't make a difference in terms of the vote. You're replacing one Republican vote with another Republican vote.
Well, but Doug Jones would not be another Republican vote.
In terms of having more join the Senate.
Right.
In terms of the havoc it wreaks, it's mostly has to do with the way people are perceiving the Republican Party right now. I think child molester, frankly, is a little bit dramatic. I think the headlines love that.
Well, he is accused of being a child molester. It's not dramatic. It's what he's charged with.
I think it's more significant in terms of politics that he was removed from the federal bench twice for disobeying, for not following the law.
But I would assume the average person on the street knows a little bit less about that. Maybe in Alabama they do than this. You actually are a friend of Doug Jones, former colleague. You going down to Alabama this weekend?
I am. I'm not sure politically I can help. A guy from Boston can help a guy in Alabama. But Doug and I served as U.S. attorneys in the Clinton administration, and we've been good friends for 20 years.
What does it say to you as a citizen, not just a friend, but as a citizen of the United States, when you wake up this morning, you read that 71% of the Republicans in Alabama do not believe any of the charges against Roy. What does that say?
I don't know. Probably a third of Americans still think that President Obama was born outside of the U.S., so I don't know what to make of that.
There's a significant part of that culture has to play here also. You've got an electorate in an area where the idea of an adult courting a teenager is actually seen as a good thing because he can provide for her, keep her out of trouble.
You're not going to make the Jesus comparison,
nope,
I hope.
Nope, not at all. Not at all. But I'm saying that if you're coming from a background where personally you believe that that's a good thing, it's very difficult to see what Roy Moore has done as bad.
Yeah, I don't want to delve into any private conversations you've had with your friend, but I assume he and his supporters are incredulous too. I know this is red state Alabama. Right. Democrats don't have much of a chance. No. If I said to you, Don Stern, 2 months ago, in the reddest state in America, you don't have to know Doug Jones, a Democrat's going to be running against the guy who's accused of molesting a 14-year-old little girl, what would you say?
Yeah, I think you're right. The thing, the psyche of Alabamans is we will decide our own fate. And so there is very much, a we versus them approach politically. And that's frankly a little bit what Doug is going up against, which is, and Moore and now Trump are sort of piling that on, which is, don't tell us how to vote. We're going to take care of our own business. And
so a guy from Massachusetts going down is really going to help that thing.
Well,
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I'm going to wear my Alabama football hat.
That's a great idea. Or make America great again. The other blue, though. One last thing about taxes. Speaking of the benefit, I still can't politically forget the content of this thing. Is the value of finally having done something, anything, outweigh the clear inequity of what they've done? I mean, overwhelmingly people oppose this, but it's early on. I mean,
I think we have to wait and see for the 2018 elections whether.
Well, I'm saying, so
what
how does that play out? The average middle class person is going to get a small tax cut. The big boys and girls are going to get huge tax cuts. So how does this play out when there's actually money in somebody's pocket, even if it's a modest amount of money?
I think once people really sit down and see whether they're using an accountant or TurboTax and see what deductions are no longer open to them, whether they can still deduct state and local taxes, their student loans, their
but the bottom line is going to be the bottom line, isn't it?
It is to an extent, but when people start seeing how it impacts them personally instead of the broad strokes, I think that's when they'll make up their mind about whether it was worth it.
Chuck Todd told us on the radio the other day from Meet the Press, he thinks this is the nightmare for the Republicans in 2018. Do you?
On the tax
bill, yeah.
There's not much time between now and the next cycle of the election. So the real question is how much are people going to see and how much is it going to affect their pocketbook in the next really 18 months is what we're talking about. Next, less than that, really.
12 months or so.
Yeah.
I agree. Lylah, great to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks so much. Don,
okay.
appreciate it.
Thanks.
Enjoy Alabama.
Yeah,
Let us know how it goes.